You want to change your life? You got to make a decision today. The question is, who do I want to become? That's the decision you got to make today. Now, once you get that vision, I need you to start feeding it like your life depends on it, because guess what? It does. See, every single day, whether you realize it or not, you're feeding something. You're feeding a thought, a belief, a fear, a habit, a dream. You planting seeds with your words, with your energy, with your time, and with your focus. Now the question isn't, are you growing something? The question is, what are you growing? See, if you feed doubt, it'll grow. If you feed fear, it'll spread. If you feed excuses, they'll multiply. But if you feed discipline, you'll get stronger. If you feed belief, you'll break through. And if you feed your vision, even when nobody else sees it, you'll build the life you were born for. So let me ask you this again. What are you feeding? Because the strongest people you know, the ones who rise under pressure, the ones who win when it counts, they don't feed their excuses. They don't feed their comfort zone. They feed the fire. They feed the discipline, the sacrifice, the silence that nobody sees when they're grinding behind the scenes. They feed the hunger to be better than they were yesterday. Because they know you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. You fall to the level of your rituals. You fall to the level of your routines. And those habits, those rituals, those routines, they're built by what you feed. You want to grow stronger? Then I need you to feed consistency. You want to lead better? I need you to feed humility. You want to love harder? I need you to feed forgiveness. And if you want to break generational curses, I need you to feed faith, feed vision, feed purpose, even if nobody else around you gets it. You hear me? Because lions, they don't wait for the approval of sheep. You weren't built for average, and you weren't created to coast. You were born with the power to shape your life, but only if you feed the part of you that's ready to fight. See, too many people out here starving their greatness while feeding their distractions. They starving their potential and they feeding their pride. They feeding their comfort. They're feeding fear of failure. But let me remind you that growth never feels good, y'all. That's why most people don't grow. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It's lonely and it's painful. But guess what? Pain is the prerequisite for power. If you want strength, you gotta be willing to be stretched. You gotta be willing to outlast the storm and outgrow the version of you that keeps playing small. Because if you play small, you stay small. You don't become who you called to be by feeding your old self. You become who you need to be by killing the old you daily, feeding the future version of you daily, sacrificing the old you for the new version of you to come through. See, you're not waiting on the world is waiting on you, but it can't rise up until you do, until you feed the right roots. So feed the discipline when you're tired, feed the prayer when you doubting, feed the vision when no one is clapping, feed the purpose when quitting feels easier. You hear me? And when you do, the world won't be able to ignore you. You hear me? They will only see your growth, because what you feed grows. And when you start feeding your faith more than your fear, feeding your purpose more than your pain, feeding your consistency more than your cravings, you become unstoppable. So here's what I want you to do today. I want you to stand up, look in the mirror, and tell yourself, I will no longer feed what's draining me. I will no longer water the weeds. I will only feed what fuels my greatness, because that's how you build a legacy. That's how you master the inner game. That's how you turn the pressure into power instead of pain. And that's how you feed the life you were born to live. All right, let's be clear. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. What you tolerate is going to continue. What you accept is going to grow. So if you're tired of struggling, then stop feeding the struggle. If you're tired of losing, stop feeding the habits that's making you lose. You don't get what you want in life. You get what you work for. You get what you water. Every late night, you grind. Every early morning, you show up. Every time you say no to temptation and yes to purpose, you're feeding your destiny. See, the ones at the top, they don't just wake up with more talent, they wake up with more drive. They wake up with more intention. They feed their vision with clarity. They feed their grind with consistency. And while the world is distracted, they're locked in. They're focused. They're choosing growth over comfort because comfort don't build champions. Pain does. Discomfort does. Pressure does. And pressure don't break the great ones. It reveals them. But only if you've been feeding your foundation. If you haven't been doing the work in the dark, don't expect to shine in the light. You say you want success, but what are you planting? What are you feeding? What are you watering? Are you feeding your excuses or your execution? Are you feeding your ego or your evolution? Are you feeding validation from the crowd or values from within? Because at the end of the day, everything you want is planted in the soil of your habits, planted in the soil of your routines, planted in the soil of your rituals. And the harvest only comes to those who are faithful to the work. Even when it's boring, even when it's lonely, and even when it hurts. See, faith without work is dead, y'all. But work without focus is wasted. So feed the focus, feed the reps, feed the effort that nobody claps for. Because guess what, y'all? You don't need applause. You need accountability. You don't need more motivation. You need more discipline. See, that's what keeps you moving when the hype dies down, and that's what keeps you grounded when the storm finally hits town. And the storm, y'all, guess what? It's gonna come. Life is gonna test you. The wind is gonna blow. People gonna doubt you. And shit, sometimes you'll doubt you. But if you've been feeding your faith, you'll still rise. If you've been feeding your faith, you'll still grow. If you've been feeding your faith, you'll still push, y'all, because the roots, they don't lie. You either fed them or you didn't. And if you didn't, don't expect to stand strong when the wind starts to blow. Don't expect to stand strong when life tries to knock you over. But if you did, if you've been showing up every day, feeding your craft, feeding your calling, feeding your commitment, then no storm can stop you because what you feed becomes who you are. So stop playing small, stop watering weeds, stop giving time and energy to what's killing your growth. I need you to feed the good, feed the discipline, feed the light inside of you that says, I'm not done. Feed the light inside of you that said, I'm a champion. Feed the light inside of you that says, I want to break through. And every time you're tempted to fall back into comfort, remind yourself, if you feed it, it'll grow. So what's it going to be, y'all? Will you feed your greatness or will you starve your potential? You hear me? The choice is yours. The harvest is coming, so feed it and grow.